The White House press room was buzzing with its usual energy. Reporters shuffled their papers, cameras flashed, and aides whispered last-minute instructions. President Donald Trump walked in, confident as always, ready to face the media. Among the reporters was a young woman named Clara Hayes, a 28-year-old journalist who had built a reputation for being calm, professional, and fearless when asking tough questions. She sat quietly in the second row, notebook in hand, but her mind was far from steady. When Trump pointed at her for a question, the room fell silent. Clara stood up, her voice shaking slightly as she asked, "Mr. President, what would you say to families who feel forgotten? Families who've lost everything and are barely hanging on?" It wasn't just the question that caught Trump's attention, but the way Clara's eyes glistened with unshed tears. She was holding something back, something personal. For a brief second, Trump hesitated before answering. "I'd tell them they're not forgotten. Not by me, not by this country," he said firmly, but his gaze lingered on Clara longer than usual. He noticed the way she gripped her pen tightly, her knuckles pale. The rest of the room moved on, reporters firing more questions, but Trump couldn't shake the image of Clara's eyes. Eyes that carried a weight beyond journalism. As the press conference ended, aides rushed him toward the exit, but he slowed down, glancing back at Clara. Something about her question, about her tears, stuck with him. Trump had faced countless reporters before, but this one felt different. He didn't know why yet, but deep down he knew he'd soon find out. That evening, as Trump sat in the Oval Office reviewing briefings, Clara's face kept resurfacing in his thoughts. He finally asked an aide, "Who was that reporter today? The one with the question about forgotten families?" The aide checked his notes. "Clara Hayes, sir. She works for an independent news outlet. Young, but gaining recognition." Trump nodded. Something told him this wasn't just about journalism. 2 days later, during another press event, Clara was there again. She didn't ask a question this time, but Trump noticed her quiet presence. After the event, instead of rushing out as usual, he motioned for security to bring her to a side hallway. Clara looked startled, but followed nervously. "Mr. President," she asked softly. "I just wanted to know," Trump said, lowering his voice. "Why did you ask me that question the other day about forgotten families? You seemed personal about it." Clara hesitated. Her eyes flickered with pain. "Because I know what it feels like. My family was one of them." Trump leaned forward, sensing the weight of her words. "Tell me." She shook her head. "It's not something I usually share. Reporters aren't supposed to become the story." But Trump's expression wasn't that of a politician. It was human, almost fatherly. "Sometimes," he said gently, "the story is what needs to be heard." For a moment, Clara considered walking away, but something in his tone broke through her guarded heart. And so, with tears threatening to spill, she whispered, "My father, he gave everything for this country. And when he needed help, no one was there." Trump's chest tightened. He could already sense that her story would change everything. Clara's voice trembled as she spoke, but there was a determination behind her tears. "My father's name was Michael Hayes. He was a decorated Army veteran. He served 2 tours overseas, and when he came back, he wasn't the same." Trump listened intently, nodding slowly. "He struggled," Clara continued. "Nightmares, panic attacks, guilt. My mom tried to help, but bills piled up. We reached out for assistance, but everything was delayed. Paperwork, endless phone calls, promises that never came through. It felt like shouting into an empty room." Her throat tightened. "One winter, we lost our house. My father was too proud to admit how bad it was. He kept saying he'd find a way, but eventually he couldn't carry the burden anymore." Her voice cracked. "He took his own life when I was 16. Trump's chest sank, as if the words carried a physical weight. "I became a reporter because I wanted to give a voice to people like him. Families who slip through the cracks while politicians argue. That's why I asked you that question. Not for sound bites, but because I wanted to see if you'd look me in the eye and mean it." Trump didn't speak right away. For once, the famously outspoken man was silent. He could see the pain in her trembling hands, in the way she struggled to stay professional even as her heart bled. Finally, he said quietly, "Clara, I'm sorry. No one should feel forgotten after giving so much." For the first time in years, Clara felt someone in power wasn't dismissing her pain, but listening. Trump wasn't easily shaken, but Clara's story lingered with him long after she walked away that day. Sitting alone in the Oval Office, he replayed her words. Families who slipped through the cracks. He thought about the countless veterans he'd shaken hands with at rallies, the ones who smiled for photos but whispered about their struggles afterward. The next day, he summoned his advisors. "I want to know," he demanded, "how many veterans are waiting for help right now? Housing, medical, mental health. Give me the real numbers, not the polished reports." His staff exchanged nervous glances. They weren't used to this tone. Trump wasn't talking politics. He was talking urgency. That evening, he held a rally. Cameras flashed. Chants roared. But when he stepped up to the podium, his speech took an unexpected turn. "There's something I need to say tonight," he began, scanning the crowd. "We talk about strength, about winning, about greatness, but greatness means nothing if we forget the people who gave everything for this country. Too many of them come home and feel invisible. I met someone this week who reminded me of that. And I want you to know, I hear you. I see you. You are not forgotten." Clara, watching from the press section, froze. He was speaking because of her. The crowd erupted in cheers, but Clara's chest tightened. Not with pride, but with something deeper. Maybe, just maybe, her father's voice was finally being heard. Though Clara was moved, part of her remained skeptical. After all, she'd seen politicians make promises before. She told herself, "Don't get fooled by words." But what struck her was how Trump looked directly at her when making that vow, as if silently saying, "This is for you." After the rally, Clara returned to her hotel room where she kept a small wooden box on the nightstand. Inside were her father's dog tags, a faded photo of him in uniform, and the last letter he had written to her before his passing. She picked it up and whispered, "Dad, I don't know if this will change anything, but at least someone listened." The next morning, Clara received an unexpected call. A White House staffer asked if she'd be willing to meet privately with Trump again. No cameras, no press. Her heart pounded. Part of her wanted to decline. She wasn't supposed to be part of the story. But something told her this was bigger than journalism. It was about her father and the countless others like him. When she walked into the Roosevelt Room, Trump stood waiting, holding a folder. "Clara," he said warmly, "I did some digging, and you were right. The numbers are worse than I thought." He slid the folder toward her. Charts, graphs, waiting lists, proof that veterans were drowning in bureaucracy. "I want to do something," he said. "But I need your help. Not as a reporter, but as someone who's lived it." Clara's breath caught. For the first time, she realized he wasn't just reacting. He was inviting her to be part of the solution. Clara sat across from Trump, staring at the folder. "You're asking me to what exactly?" Trump leaned forward. "I don't want polished reports. I want real stories. You know, families. You know what they go through. If you're willing, help me see what the numbers don't show." Clara hesitated. She wasn't sure if this was genuine or political theater. But when she thought of her father, the broken man who had once been a proud soldier, her heart softened. "Okay," she said finally. "But this isn't about headlines. If I do this, it's for them. Not for you, not for me. For them." Trump gave a small nod. "Fair enough." Over the next few weeks, Clara traveled, meeting veterans across the country. Homeless men sleeping in cars. Single mothers who'd served, now unable to afford health care. Families carrying folded flags but forgotten by the system. She recorded their stories, filled notebooks with their words, and brought them back to Trump. Each time he listened more carefully than she expected. Sometimes his eyes hardened in anger. Other times they softened in silence. One evening as Clara was about to leave, Trump said quietly, "You know, when I first saw those tears in your eyes, I thought maybe it was just a moment. But now I see it was the truth speaking." Clara walked away with a heavy heart. She wanted to keep her distance as a reporter, but somehow against her instincts, She was beginning to believe him. Despite the progress, Clara struggled internally. At night, she lay awake asking herself, "Am I betraying journalism?" Reporters weren't supposed to get involved. They were supposed to observe, question, report. Yet, here she was sharing veteran stories directly with the president. At the next press briefing, she avoided Trump's eyes. Other reporters noticed her silence. "Clara, why aren't you asking your usual sharp questions?" One colleague teased. She forced a smile, but guilt gnawed at her. She wasn't sure which side of the line she stood on anymore. After the briefing, Trump approached her quietly. "You're avoiding me," he said. Clara crossed her arms. "I can't be seen as your ally. People will say I've lost my objectivity." Trump paused, then said something unexpected. "Clara, this isn't about politics. This is about people. Forget me. Think of them." Her defenses faltered. He was right. This wasn't about her career. It was about families like hers. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking a dangerous line, one that could cost her everything if misunderstood. One cold evening in Detroit, Clara met a man named Sergeant David Lopez who had lost both legs in combat. He lived in a tiny apartment surviving on disability checks that barely covered food. "My kids think I'm broken," he whispered, his voice cracking. "They look at me like I'm half a man. The truth is I feel half a man. I gave everything to this country, and now I feel thrown away." Clara's hand shook as she wrote down his words. When she later recited them to Trump, his face darkened. "That's not right," Trump muttered. "No man who served this country should feel that way. Not on my watch." For the first time, Clara realized his anger wasn't staged. It was raw, genuine. She saw not the politician but the man behind the podium. Still, part of her kept whispering, "Don't trust too much. Don't forget who you are." One evening after a long day, Clara visited her mother. They sat at the kitchen table sipping tea. "Mom," Clara asked softly, "do you think Dad would have believed someone in power cared?" Her mother sighed, eyes misting. "Your father was proud, but inside, he felt invisible. If anyone had listened back then, maybe things would have been different." Clara clenched her fists. That thought haunted her. Maybe she couldn't save her father, but maybe she could save others. Her mother touched her hand. "Be careful, Clara. Don't lose yourself in this. Remember why you became a reporter. To seek truth, not to become part of it." Clara nodded, but deep down she knew her path was already shifting. A few weeks later, Trump invited Clara to a private meeting with a group of veterans at the White House. They shared their struggles directly. Broken promises, years-long wait lists, untreated trauma. One widow broke down, sobbing, "My husband died waiting for treatment that never came. Now my kids ask why the country he served didn't save him." Trump looked shaken. He excused himself afterward, walking out to the rose garden alone. Clara followed at a distance and saw him lower his head unusually still. When he returned, his voice was firm. "We're going to fix this. No excuses." Clara had never seen him so quiet, so affected. At that moment, she realized the tears he had seen in her eyes weeks ago were now mirrored in his. The more Clara worked with Trump behind the scenes, the more suspicious her colleagues became during a live briefing. One reporter turned toward her. "Clara, aren't you a little too cozy with the administration these days? You haven't been asking the tough questions you're known for." The room chuckled, but Clara froze. Trump glanced at her, then spoke up. "She's doing her job just fine. Sometimes the toughest questions aren't asked in front of cameras." Clara's cheeks burned. She hated the attention but was oddly grateful for his defense. Still, her reputation as a journalist was now in question. That night, Clara returned to her hotel and opened her father's letter again. "Clara, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't hold on. Please don't be angry with me. Promise me you'll live your life fighting for those who can't fight for themselves. Use your voice, Clara. Be louder than I ever could." Tears spilled down her cheeks. For the first time, she realized she wasn't betraying her father by helping Trump. She was fulfilling his last wish. Weeks later, Trump called a press conference. Clara sat in the front row, notebook trembling in her hands. My fellow Americans, Trump began. Today, we're announcing the Forgotten Families Initiative, a nationwide program to cut red tape for veterans, provide faster mental health care, and ensure no family feels invisible again. He paused, his eyes meeting Clara's. This idea came from a question, a painful question, from a reporter whose tears told me the truth. She reminded me that statistics are human lives, and I want to thank her publicly for being brave enough to speak from the heart. The room gasped. All eyes turned to Clara. She wanted to disappear, but deep down she felt her father's spirit beside her, whispering, "This is what I meant. This is your voice." The backlash was immediate. Headlines swirled. Reporter too close to the president. Is Clara Hayes still objective? Her editor called. Clara, this doesn't look good. People are saying you've crossed a line. Clara's stomach sank. She might lose everything she had worked for. But when she looked at the faces of veterans she had interviewed, their gratitude, their hope, she knew she couldn't regret it. Trump surprised Clara by asking her to join him on a visit to a veterans hospital. At first, she resisted, but eventually she agreed. Together they walked through halls filled with wounded soldiers. One young man reached out, clutching Clara's hand. "Thank you for telling our stories. We feel seen now." Clara's throat tightened. She realized it wasn't about her career anymore. It was about healing. Late one night, Clara sat alone on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, questioning everything. Had she done the right thing, or had she compromised her profession? Trump approached quietly. "You're thinking too much," he said gently. Clara chuckled bitterly. "That's what reporters do." He sat beside her. "Listen, Clara, history won't remember who asked the toughest question in the press room. It'll remember who made a difference." His words settled into her heart like a stone sinking in water. Clara received a call from Sergeant Lopez, the double amputee she had interviewed. His voice cracked with emotion. "Clara, I just got approved for treatment I've been waiting years for. My kids, they hugged me today like they believe in me again." "Thank you." Clara hung up and wept. For the first time, she felt her father's letter being fulfilled. Months later, at a veterans gala, Trump unexpectedly called Clara onto the stage. "This woman," he said, "asked me a question that broke my heart. And, because of that, we changed lives." She reminded us that tears aren't weakness, they're truth. Clara stood frozen, applause echoing around her. She didn't want the spotlight, but she felt her father's pride. After the gala, Trump handed Clara a small package. "Open it later," he said. That night, in her quiet hotel room, she unwrapped it. Inside was a framed photograph of her father in uniform. Trump had found it in military archives and a note beneath it. "Michael Hayes is not forgotten. Neither is his family, Donald J. Trump." Clara broke down, clutching the frame to her chest. For the first time, the grief felt lighter. Months later, Clara stood at her father's grave, the framed photo resting beside the headstone. "Dad," she whispered, "your story was heard. Not just by me, but by the world. I thought I had to stay detached to be strong, but I realize now strength is in caring. Even tears can change lives." As she walked away, the sun broke through the clouds, bathing the cemetery in golden light. Donald Trump had seen her tears, and instead of dismissing them, he let them guide him. The moral was clear. Sometimes the smallest crack in a strong facade, the glisten of tears, can open the door to change a nation. And Clara knew deep in her heart that her father was finally at peace.